Bulldog Hanover, the Bulldog does it again. Bulldog Hanover, Rocky Road Hanover, and then Tattoo Artist. It's Bulldog Hanover, 1:45 and 4. There it is, the fastest mile in harness racing history.
Well, it's Bob Pandolfo, and welcome to Power Pace with Pandy, and it's New Year's Eve, December 31st, 2024, and I have a version of a harness racing, little harness racing history, current history, past history. We started out there with Bulldog Hanover, setting the world record back in 2022 at the Meadowlands and the William Horton Memorial. That was a 1:45 and 4 mile. Now, the reason why I wanted to make this video is recently Freehold Raceway, which is the oldest track in the country, closed, and that was their last racing date was December 28th, just a few days ago. A lot of people showed up too, which is I couldn't make it. I'm not that close to, it was kind of a long drive. It was raining that day. I wish I could have made it, but a lot of people went. I was glad to see that. A lot of people in the industry went. A lot of people that had a history of working at Freehold Park, either as a driver, a trainer, or an owner, were there. And it's unfortunate when a track closes, because especially for the people that make their living there, the employees of the track, and of course the horsemen. And now the horsemen will have to try to find other places to race. Some of them, of course, did race at other places, but some of them, that was where they made the bulk of their income, because Freehold had a lot of race dates every year for many, many years. Even when they had the fire years ago, they put up tents. Back in the day when the half-mile track was really at its peak, half-mile track harness racing, I really like Freehold. I like Freehold, Monticello, Roosevelt, and Yonkers, and Northfield. Those are my five favorite half-mile tracks, particularly Yonkers, Roosevelt, and Monticello, and Northfield. But Freehold I played too at times. And back when you had the wood bikes, it was fun. You had a lot of closes and everything. A lot of movement. There was nothing like half-mile track racing when harness racing was at its peak, in my opinion. It was also for betting purposes and handicapping. To me, that was the best. Their best chance of making a profit was the half-mile tracks when you had the old wood bikes. I'll put a link down at the bottom, which will kind of go over why I think harness racing has declined in popularity over the years. I don't want to go into all that about the bikes now, but I wanted to address some comments that I've seen on social media. So a lot of people said, geez, it's a shame, all these tracks are closing. And sure, a lot of tracks have closed. You go back to when I was started in the business in the 70s as a handicapper and a writer. And I also called charts. Some of you may know I did television. I was on the channel WORTV, Channel 9, racing from Roosevelt, the OTB show, different things like that I did. And at that time, the first tracks that closed were Liberty Bell and Brandywine, which were in the Brandywine Valley. And I guess at one time they did well. I never went to either one of those tracks, although I did make some bets at those tracks. But they closed, fairly early in my career as a handicapper. Then they built Garden State, which was a beautiful track, pretty much in the same area. That was in New Jersey though, and that didn't last long. That was a whole other issue with the ownership and everything. And then, of course, Roosevelt Raceway, which was, the number one track in the country, and I think pretty much in North America, I'd have to say. I don't think any of the Canadian tracks ever eclipsed Roosevelt for the amount of handle that they did. And Roosevelt had, of course, a lot of the great races, like the International Trot and the Cane Pace, and it was a very, very successful track, and that closed. That's a whole other story. A lot of politics involved. Now, of course, Roosevelt, before it closed, the Meadowlands did open in the late 70s, and that certainly contributed to the demise of Roosevelt Raceway, as did New York off-track betting. Then, the next tracks to close, well, I don't know if I have the complete chronological order correct. But from my recollection, some of the tracks that were major tracks that closed were the Chicago tracks. Maywood Park, the half-mile track, Balmoral, the 1 mile track. Now, that was unusual too because Chicago is a great sports town, and you had Arlington Park, the thoroughbred track, closed not that long ago. I mean, that was a beautiful track. And Balmoral and Maywood, I mean, they had good racing and they did very well for years. What happened though is as the casinos started as legislation started to be approved in different states to support the racetracks with casino wagering, sometimes slots only, and sometimes other casino games. Illinois, they have casinos, but they never quite set up the deal with, slots at the racetracks. So they have casinos, but they're not. So they just never put it together, So Maywood Park and Balmoral closed. Arlington closed. So then, of course, Detroit had, in Michigan, had the same problems with some of the tracks, and they closed also some of the Michigan tracks that were fairly popular and did pretty well. So, a lot of people say, well, these tracks are closing and, now Freehold closed and, it's doomsday. But I want to tell you something, going back to around 20 years ago, around 2002, 2003, that was when you started to get the first offset bikes. There was a bike called the Advantage 6.3, which was 6 inches offset. So it's actually kind of crooked. That made the horses go even faster than they already were going. As you had this evolution of the sulky. Now the bikes are most of them I think are 10 inches offset. But when that bike came out, that really increased the speed bias. And by about 2003, everybody was using that. They called it the Harmer too, because I believe the gentleman who was in the business, he was a driver and horseman, Tom Harmer. I think he was the one that developed it. They call it the Harmer. And but then other people, came out with their own versions of bikes very similar to that. I mean, there's been tons of them. These are more expensive bikes. They're made of steel. They're big. They're long. They're fast, and they're offset. Like I said, most of them are 10-inch offset now. When that happened, myself and other people I know started to notice that now it was getting even tougher. Once they went to the offset bikes, even tougher to rally from off the pace. And then the backstretch moves that made half-mile tracks so exciting, like the big 3-wide sweeps down the backstretch, and the big battles on the final turn where you have horses going 3 and 4 wide. The big moves at the 3/4. That basically was eliminated. Horses winning from third over, that was basically eliminated. Horses winning from post 8 was almost eliminated. As a lot of people know, if you followed my career back when I was handicapping Roosevelt and Yonkers for Sportsite, I picked a lot of long shots that won from posts 6, 7, and 8. In fact, 7 and 8 were my bread and butter posts. And a lot of times I gave them out of my best bets. I mean, I had some really big best bets, like $20, $30 horses that won. Now, I mean, I haven't bet a horse from post 8 on a half-mile track in, I think, like 15 years or something like that. I just won't bet them, because I know the data, and if you look at the data on it, the ROI on post 8 from half-mile tracks is so unbelievably low that, to me, it's mathematically just not feasible, not smart, let's put it that way, to bet a horse from post 8. I don't really care who the horse is. It's just not, and even if you had a really good horse who's in good form and he's going off at like 8-1 or something, the chances are he should be 20-1. There are very, very few overlays from post 7 and 8, especially post 8 on half-mile tracks. You would have to have a horse that is like, a monster that's going off at like 30-1, and then you could say, maybe I'll take a shot, But a lot of times I see horses from post 8 even now that are going off like 5-1, and I'm like, who do we bet this horse? It should be 20 and 25-1. I mean, the post 8's winning at 2.5% at this track, right? And the ROI, like I said, I mean, it's way in the tank. I mean, you would have to be a genius to trying to figure out how to profit from horses from post-date now on half-mile tracks. So of course that's, one of the reasons why the half-mile tracks, declined in popularity, as did 5/8s. And the whole speed bias and inside bias, that's what hurt these tracks. So back then in 2003, I thought to myself, wow, I'd give this sport 20 years. I thought by around now, like around 2024, that probably half the tracks would have closed. And I thought, these half-mile tracks, they're probably all going to close. Now, of course, I didn't know that you were going to have all these casinos come in, and that you were going to have, people and political leaders who saw the benefits of having both a racetrack and a casino. Now, I don't even know why. You don't really need a racetrack to have a successful casino. And of course, the states were mainly interested in making money off the casinos, right? It's like the politicians looked at it and thought, wow, we could put casinos in and we'll get all this tax revenue, right? And we'll, and sure, the other thing is you get jobs, it adds jobs. But for some reason, there were enough politicians who wanted to tie the two together. There are advantages of having racetracks. It keeps you get, it kind of preserves some of the farmland. You have these beautiful breeding farms. So that was one of the reasons why some politicians said, let's not kill this. This is an historic sport. Thoroughbred racing and harness racing are, part of our sports history. The horses are beautiful, and somehow or another they hooked them together, which helped keep the racing alive. And of course, in a lot of cases, it preserved those jobs, the people who were working at the racetrack. If you look at a track, even like if you look at thoroughbred racing, look at like the New York Racing Association, they have Aqueduct, Belmont, and Saratoga. And now they're redoing Belmont, and I guess they're going to close Aqueduct. I think that's the plan. But right now it's just Aqueduct and Saratoga, and then Belmont is going to open the new Belmont in 2026. But I don't know if they'd be racing if they don't have the casino. They have a very successful casino at Aqueduct, and that money fuels the other tracks. Saratoga really doesn't need the casino because it's a boutique track. It only races during the summer, and that's probably the most successful track in the country for that time period. As far as our short meet, it's hard to be more successful. I was at the Travers this year, August 24th, I think it was. The place there, you could barely move. The place was packed. Really amazing card. And it's a great place, great town. But most tracks, can't survive now without the casinos. And like I said, I don't know if these tracks, Aqueduct and Belmont in particular, I don't even know if they'd be racing today. They may have gone out of business if it wasn't for that very successful casino they have in Queens, in Ozone Park. So, that was a big part of the business, how they tied that together. But this is one I wanted to point it out. I didn't think these tracks, I thought harness racing would be in really, really bad shape, much worse than it is now in 2024. Because you have to realize that, all right, I just named all these tracks that closed. I probably missed a few. But if you look at it, here's all these tracks that have opened. Right? I thought tracks would close. I didn't think they'd be replaced. You have in Ohio, you have Miami Valley, because you still have Northfield, which does pretty good. You have Dayton, right? Miami Valley opened in 2013, Dayton in 2014, and these tracks do pretty well. In Maine, you have Cumberland, right? It opened in 2023. Then you have Kentucky harness racing, right? You have Oak Grove in Kentucky. Now you always had the Lexington, the Red Mile, that's still there, but now they have Oak Grove. Minnesota, you have Running Aces. Indiana has done very well. Indiana, you have Hoosier Park. Hoosier Park is a 7/8 track. They do very well. They started out slow. Their handle was kind of low at first, even though the racing was good, but it eventually did pretty good. And of course, in Pennsylvania, you had Pocono and you had the Meadows, but then they added Philadelphia, which is, down in Chester. which is kind of between Philadelphia and not Dover. Let's see, I can't remember the name of the other town in Delaware, but it's kind of between Delaware and Philly, and it's called Chester, and kind of a cool track. The track goes out over the water. If you're sitting looking at the races, you see the boats coming by in the back. And then Virginia, your Colonial Downs stopped racing harness racing, but then they added Shenandoah Downs. It surprised me. I didn't think they'd have another harness track in Virginia. And then, of course, in Massachusetts, you have Plain Ridge, which just opened, I think, I don't know, a few years ago. And Plain Ridge has good, pretty good racing and, good purses. I don't even know if I missed any of the new tracks here. And now some of these tracks replaced other tracks that kind of closed. Like I think Dayton replaced Toledo. There was Lebanon track in Ohio, and there was Miami Valley. Miami Valley replaced Lebanon. But some of them didn't replace anything. They just opened up like Philadelphia. I mean, there were 2 harness tracks in Pennsylvania for a long time, the Meadows and Pocono Downs. Now, of course, Pocono Downs, and this is another thing, Pocono Downs, which is about an hour from where I live, that track probably that would have closed a long time ago. I mean, that was falling apart. It was a dumpy, little track. I liked going there. I used to go even when it was a dumpy little track. But they put the beautiful casino in. It's a really nice track, and it's a very nice casino. That's one of my favorite places to go, actually, Mohegan Sun Pocono in Wilkes-Barre. But I mean, that track would not be there. I can guarantee you that track would have closed a long time ago if it wasn't for that casino. And the Meadows, was closer to Pittsburgh. I don't know, maybe that would have held on for a while, but I still think it would have closed. So that's the thing. A lot of these tracks that are still racing were buoyed by the casino money. And then of course all these new tracks, they all have casinos. So yes, tracks closed, but they were replaced. And some of them, like I said, they were replaced by tracks that weren't even there in the first place. Minnesota, I don't know, did Minnesota ever have, I don't even know if Minnesota ever had harness racing, but they have running aces now. So, I'm not saying that the sport isn't a strong point. As long as you have this speed bias, which, and this inside post bias, which contributes to low payoffs and a high percentage of winning favorites, the sport is going to have it's in jeopardy, because what made the sport popular, you used to have about 35% winning favorites, and you had nice payoffs, and you had exciting racing where horses would come from all over the place. Your horse could be sitting 8th at the half on a half-mile track and could go 4th over and boom, go wide down the backstretch and win. I mean, I hit Hervé Filion, Carmine Avatel, and some of these other great drivers quite a few times, from outside post on Yonkers and Roosevelt. And Yonkers had a short stretch. Didn't make any difference. So, I mean, in fact, Yonkers was very exciting because with the short stretch, you had to make a move earlier. And that's where you got all that great action down the backstretch, which you don't see anymore. Because the horses just can't gain the time. The fractions and everything is so fast, and the bikes are so long. So, as long as the people that run these tracks aren't going to make the changes, there are changes that you can easily make to fix the sport. Talked about it before. Like I said, I'll put a video down at the bottom of this, which talks about why the racing isn't as exciting as it used to be. But in terms of the overall sport, the health of the sport, I thought it would be pretty much devastated by 2024. When I saw that bike come out in 2002, and then by 2003 everybody had it, and then all of a sudden, it was even more front runners. It was basically every race, just like it is now. On the 1 mile tracks and the 7/8 tracks, you could still get closes in there. But I'm talking about the 5/8 and the half mile tracks. Basically every race, it's like 2 horses leave, and either one horse goes wire to wire, the horse sitting behind him, the pocket horse wins. And occasionally a horse comes up first over and chokes up and wins. The only time you see a horse winning from off the pace, there's like a blazing pace. it's, years ago it wasn't like that. You didn't even need a fast pace to win from off the pace years ago, because the races were slower, so you had more time to catch up. But with these casinos that got in there, yes, tracks closed, but there's still plenty of harness tracks. There's a lot of, and some of them are doing really good. I'm surprised. Indiana and Ohio, I have to say, really surprised me, because harness racing's doing well at these tracks, and they're nice tracks. Some of these new tracks are really, really nice tracks. Like, in Ohio, you have Dayton and Miami Valley, really nice tracks, and you have Hoosier in Indiana, and they have a good breeding program. So the owners are in a good situation in these tracks. Here's Harrah's, as you can see, Harrah's is a casino. Here's Harrah's, Hoosier Park, best places to work, voted best places to work, one of the best places to work in Indiana. Here's the outside. So anyway, I just wanted to mention that, yes, tracks have closed, but there's still plenty of harness tracks. And I didn't mention all the tracks that are still racing. I mean, there's other tracks, upstate New York, there's Saratoga Harness, and, there's tracks in Canada. There's a lot of other tracks. I didn't mention all the tracks. There's still plenty of tracks. Monticello's still racing. So, unfortunately, though, eventually, the politicians may pull the plug if the handle on these tracks goes too low, which is the reason why it would be good if we had, the people that ran these tracks, showed some sort of interest in improving the racing, which can be done. If any of these tracks hired me to run the track for a while, and I'm not just me, there's probably other people too. I'm just saying, though, that if you said to me, Bob, come to, we'll hire you as a consultant for a while, and whatever you want to change, you'll change, and see if we can, get the handle up. I think pretty much in a matter of, a couple of months, I can increase the handle at any of these 5/8 or half-mile tracks. I would replace all the bikes. I would figure out a bike. I would say, look, we're going to buy these bikes. They're not as fast as the other bikes, and the drivers, you have to sit up, can't lean back anymore. And we're going to have movement. If you don't move, you're not going to race here. You're not going to just sit in. We're going to have movement. We're going to have action. And I would do whatever it did. If I had to do a slanted gate, whatever I had to do, it would be, half-mile track racing would look more like Northfield Park in like the 1970s. The horses flying all over the place, leaving 3 wide on the first turn, 3 or 4 wide down the back stretch, 4 wide in the final turn. Northfield Park used to be fantastic. Now it's pretty much all levers. But I could fix it. I mean, there's no question in my mind I could fix it. But the thing is, do these tracks want to fix it? I don't know. Some of these tracks, I don't know who's running these tracks. Like, if you have a bunch of favorites winning and a low payoff, and horses just going wire to wire, or the pocket, levers winning every race, wouldn't you just think, say, hey, wait a minute, this isn't like it should be. We need a more competitive, exciting race. Let's make some changes. But they don't do it. So I don't know. I just wanted to mention that, though. I feel bad for the people that lost their jobs at Freehold, the employees, and also the horsemen now who have to try to figure out how to replace that income. At one time, the racing was very exciting at Freehold Park. Hervé Filion was a great driver who drove there years ago. Cat Manzi was another one who was a great half-mile track driver, great driver in general. Both of them, two of the greatest drivers. They were dominant at Freehold in their prime. But anyway, that's it. So thanks for tuning in. Remember to subscribe to my channel. I'd appreciate it. Have a happy New Year. This is Pandy. Enjoy yourself.